Start the show today with the fallout from the incident where a police officer kicked a man in the head as he lay on the floor. A warning that some viewers might find the following images distressing. Greater Manchester Police has suspended a firearms officer after these scenes, which are said to have happened at Manchester Airport on Tuesday. Last night, an estimated 200 people protested outside Rochdale police station, shouting, "Shame on you." And in fact, some of them were even shouting, "Allah Akbar." Now, just to run through a few of these details before we head to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. We've only seen a part of the picture so far. The footage shared shows the aftermath to an incident Greater Manchester Police are claiming led to the injury of 3 officers, including a woman, a female police officer, getting a broken nose. These were rapid response police from a different unit who responded to an emergency call and came through and acted in the heat of the moment to contain a situation which they weren't fully aware of what that was. Of course, then accusations of racism followed and a huge protest outside Rochdale police station last night. To chew all this over, let's go now to GBNews' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, I was just saying that we've only seen half of the story here, a part of the picture, the aftermath to what Greater Manchester Police claimed happened before it. And yet, this video has gone viral. It's causing huge community tensions, protests and cries of Allah Akbar outside Rochdale police station last night. Mark White, bring us up to speed.
Well, these viral videos rarely tell us the whole story. In fact, they don't even tell us half the story. This is the very end sequence in what was a violent episode in which 3 police officers were attacked, according to the police, and knocked to the ground. That female police officer, as you mentioned there, smashed in the face, suffered a broken nose. All 3 of those officers required treatment in hospital. And those attending officers, those backup officers you refer to, are the ones that you're seeing rushing in on this video here, trying to take control of the situation. Now, they had been listening to their colleagues, because the way that the modern police radio systems work is that when you are in need of urgent assistance, you press a panic button, which then opens your microphone, so you don't have to keep pressing that. You can continue then to try and defend yourself. And then at that point, of course, the officers will be able to hear everything that's going on. So they were hearing the screams of their colleagues as they were being violently assaulted, as they're rushing to the scene, knowing that they're going to deal with some violent offenders. Their first task in that scenario is to try to gain control of the situation. We've got another clip that we can show you, which is just slightly before the point there on the video that we were showing there, when those armed officers first start arriving in this airport underground car park. This is that clip.
What are you doing now? You're on camera. You're on camera. No, we aren't doing no. We're normal civilians. No. We have not done nothing. We have not done nothing. Look, we have not done nothing. We're just recording.
I can't go home. You are showing he's getting locked up.
No, what? Not really. Not really.
Well, you can hear those men there protesting their innocence, saying that they haven't done anything. But the officers that were subjected to that brutal attack are there as well, and they're pointing out these men as being responsible for that attack. So armed with this, these officers then fairly robustly get these men down to the ground, because for them they're perceiving clearly a threat. According to their colleagues who've just been attacked, these men are violent. They've just assaulted, allegedly, some of their colleagues, so they need to get them down. They need to control them. They need to handcuff them. It's violent to look at, of course it is. But what the police will say is, you know, it's a proportionate response, that when you're dealing with a violent individual, you've got to meet that threat with a violent response as well. Now, two of the four men who have now been arrested on charges of fray and assaulting emergency service workers have been released from prison. Their lawyer posted a video on social media talking about their next steps in complaining to the police. This is a clip of that video.
They were released not long ago from Cheadle police station. They then had to make their own way to the hospital. But in reality, because they've had head injuries, it was the police duty to take them to a hospital. But nevertheless, they made their own way. And now I've documented their injuries, and we are headed to Rochdale police station to make a formal complaint of assault and wounding.
And Mark White, in this last half an hour, this has taken on a decidedly political angle. The gentleman who was calling for those protests outside Rochdale last night was a Jack Khan. He's previously stood for George Galloway's Workers' Party as a candidate in Bolton South. And Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, has just said this is not a clear-cut situation, calling for calm. Very, very good politics, in my opinion. And he's warning, don't exploit this situation for political purposes. Mark White, wise words in a tense situation.
Yes, because we've got a situation where people are posting viral videos, and very selective viral videos, that show the very end sequence in, as I say, a violent episode that unfolded with police officers assaulted and then their colleagues rushing to the raid and robustly dealing with those they believed to be responsible for these assaults on the other officers. Now, you have to ask these people that are posting these selective clips why there's no images that are being posted of the assault on the police officers who were trying to carry out an arrest and a detention after a suspect had been pointed out to them for an earlier assault. None of that video is up there, only video that clearly shows the police in a bad light. Now, Andy Burnham, of course, as the Mayor of Greater Manchester, has access to a lot of the information, and that's why he is calling for calmer heads. He is saying there is more to this story. But there are others on the other side of the argument who are suggesting that there should be more protests, like we saw last night in Rochdale, more people out on the streets. And that's worrying, Martin, because we only need to think back a week to what happened in Leeds and the potential for things to spiral out of control.
Yeah, some of those protesters last night were bellowing Allah Akbar into megaphones. May I ask you, Mark, procedurally, in terms of that missing evidence or the evidence the police have of the previous attacks, do you think they'll be complied to release that to show their side of the story? Or is that now evidence that'll be subjected in a court of law, therefore we won't see it? When do you think we'll see, if you like, the police's version of earlier events?
Sadly, we won't see any of the police body-worn camera, if we see any of it at all, until the end of this process. And that's the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the policing watchdog, any subsequent disciplinary or court cases that come off that. It's purely because it's potentially prejudicial to any ongoing criminal charges that there might be, because you're looking at the alleged assault on the three police officers. That will have to be prosecuted, and that evidence from those cameras will be used for that, as well as CCTV, eyewitness interviews, and perhaps some more of that viral video that they've not shown us a clip of, if they were recording it earlier when those officers were allegedly assaulted. So all of that will be gathered by the investigators from the independent watchdog, the police investigators who are running the tandem investigation, and that will piece together more accurately than these short viral videos have done the full sequence of events, and just whether that officer who was seen there kicking the head of that individual on the ground acted proportionately, given everything he thought he, was facing, that he perceived in terms of the threat to him and his fellow colleagues.
Mark White, an excellent summary. Once again, thank you very much for joining us on the show. And to continue this conversation, I'm now joined by the former Metropolitan Police Senior Investigating Officer, Peter Kirkham. Peter, welcome to the show. Outlining there with great clarity, we only have a small part of the picture here. The police were acting, we have to take their word for it, of an earlier incident, a violent incident, Greater Manchester Police being very firm, saying 3 officers needed hospital treatments, including a woman with a broken nose. And so therefore, Peter, operationally, from a police point of view, when the boys get that call down the radio and they're responding to violence, they're going to go in to try and contain that situation as quickly and effectively as possible. And Peter, sometimes that means using a bit of force.
Good afternoon. Absolutely right. That is exactly what we employ the police to do, and we expect them to do, and we rely on them doing. They will have information, certain amount of information, before they arrive at the scene of something, and that all forms part of the backdrop to the judgment that they have to make, which is how much force to use, that they can justify as being reasonable and necessary, proportionate in all the circumstances. Now, they'll make a judgment about that, and that will apply to every bit of force that they use. It doesn't matter. It's not just a global thing of, can we use some force, yes or no? It's, can I, in this case, we've seen a kick and a stamp, can we justify that as being reasonable and necessary? Maybe the officer can, I don't know. But until we hear what the officer has to say, we can't make a judgment. We won't hear what that officer has to say. The IOPC and the courts will, and we'll then hear when that happens. Personally, I think the kick and the stamp, he's going to struggle. The man was on the floor already. The only bit of his body that he was moving, that the kick and the stamp could be sort of aimed at, as it were, is the head. What's he going to do with his head? Now, there may be an explanation, I don't know, but I think he'll struggle with that. As for the rest of it, the taking them to the ground and whatever, yes, those things, perfectly legitimate. There was the use of an incapacitant spray at one point. Tasers were drawn and pointed, I believe. Each one of those things is going to have to be justified by the officers doing it. The history of the incident is going to form part of that. The context of the incident is going to form part of that. And we cannot totally ignore the fact that it happened in an airport. And we know that violence in an airport is, not always by any means, but is often something to do with some sort of an attack on an aircraft or whatever to do with international terrorism. And so that possibility is higher than it would be in the high street on a Saturday night. And so that will form part of their judgment. All of this will be investigated by the IOPC. They will make a judgment, and if they consider that it's not made out in terms of a defence using reasonable force, then they'll refer it to the Crown Prosecution Service.
And Peter, may I ask you quickly, the decision to suspend the officer from duty in field, do you think that's the right thing to do? A lot of people are angry about that. They're saying the mob has won, but considering there is this full investigation going on, and perhaps even there could be issues around his own personal safety, considering the heightened state of emotions, do you think that was the right thing for the police to do?
Suspension from duty is not a judgment. It's not a punishment. Suspension from duty is an interim measure taken to just avoid anything getting worse for the officer, the public, or anybody else in the meantime. The issues that you mentioned, yes, they need to be considered. But the one thing that the police service, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester, will need to ask himself, this is an armed officer with a firearm that is capable of causing great damage if used inappropriately. And he will be asking himself, is this officer suitable for carrying a firearm? Now, temporarily, in the aftermath of an incident like this, any officer may be considered unsuitable for that. But the clip that we have all seen, if I was the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester, I'd be asking myself about the temperament of that officer. It raises issues of loss of control. His behaviour, his actions were significantly different from other officers present at the scene. And I would want to satisfy myself of that before bringing him back onto duty.
OK, Peter Kirkham, thank you as ever for your expert insight drawn from great heritage and time on the force. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. And we'll have lots more on this story, of course, this huge story throughout the rest of the show. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, GBNews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. So thank you very much.